Welcome to Poetry Alive, a reading, a teaching, a conversation. I'm Maya Williams, live from San Miguel de Allende in the Central Highlands of Mexico. Auspiciously on the eve of the 110th anniversary of the start of Mexico's revolution. These days, guns are scarce, and San Miguel is known worldwide as a cultural haven for poets and writers, artists and actors, musicians, really creatives of every description, and for the people just like you who support them. Tonight we'll begin with a reading, followed by a teaching, followed by a conversation with Judyth Hill. Poet and writer Catherine Merengue will moderate the conversation, and here's where you come in. If you have a question for Judyth, click on Q&A at the bottom of your screen and enter it in the box. If you have a comment for Judyth or anyone on the Poetry Alive team, click on chat, also at the bottom of your screen, and type it in the box. Judyth Hill, poet, editor, teacher, is the author of 9 books of poetry and the internationally acclaimed poem, Wage Peace, the poem that went viral long before the advent of social media. Judyth is the current president of PEN San Miguel and conducts poetry and memoir workshops at home and abroad. You may register for her December Wild Writing Workshop or a private consultation during San Miguel's literary season online. You'll find the links to register and to Judyth's website and her books in the chat. Educated at Sarah Lawrence College, Judyth later studied with poet Robert Bly and deep ecologist Dolores LaChapelle. She now makes her home in the ponderosa and aspen-covered mountains of northern Colorado. And here's a fun fact. Our New Mexico friends know Judyth as the original owner of Santa Fe's premier bakery, the Chocolate Maven, in addition to her work as a poet and restaurant critic. The woman bakes a heck of a brownie. Described by the St. Helena Examiner as energy with skin, and by the Denver Post as a tigress with a pen, it is my great pleasure to introduce Judyth Hill, my dear friend, and the person most responsible for the vibrant community of poets and poetry aficionados we have in San Miguel today. Welcome, Judyth.
Thank you. Wow. I get to be with my homies from everywhere, my San Miguel homies, my Nuevo Mexico homies, my Tennessee homies, all my beloveds. And I get to do my favorite thing, which is share poetry with you. So let's go. This poem is kind of the launch into my moving to San Miguel. I think you'll hear that here. It's called This Will Find You Ready. And it's got a little epigram. Go, I know not where, to get, I know not what. And that is from Wolfgang von Escherbach's Parsifal. When you lose everything, then you track. This world is always spinning on chicken legs at the edge of the forest. You will need each chip of obsidian, every flake of flint, all caught parts of conversation. You'll need glimpses of clematis behind fences in hidden courtyards. Remember a soaker rain, trill of oriole at first light. Every scent of hyacinth, of jasmine is a vow. Every bird song, the call to prayer, a rooftop in another city, but always your own. Call in all the magic. Set a place at your table. Silver knives, fish bones, chess pieces of ancient ivory. Can you see it? You have been there so many times. You have been the one that needs the bread, the one who comes to the table in sackcloth, the one who sits beside the king in aquamarine and emerald. The crown, the crow, the crone, they are all the same. This time, bring the sword. This blade strikes once and once only. Ask for leave and do one thing right. It's all you can do. You must ask your question. Permission will be given in both worlds. But in this story, at least, there is a second chance. Tell it the old way aloud. Build a fire of the 9 woods gathered, apple, hawthorn, hazel, rowan. Oh, you already know. You have done this. You will make what you desire appear by your own seeking, by your own willingness to sing as you approach, to walk slowly, to keep going, to serve what you walk towards with your whole broken, wild heart. Woo! So that got me here, as you can imagine, the incredible magic of not knowing the beauty that was coming. So here's a mysterious poem that's kind of my homage to Tennessee. Here is your scarab, Jung said, in the dream I did not have. Gardens appeared. I moved by bract and stem, tasted the effervescent divine in stamen and stutter. Such green as I know is mine by birthright and the divination of dark roses. My polar opposite is the sorrow of clouds, the repeat of sky on lake skin. I carried this and only this, a memory also not mine, to the mouth of Duck River, to the sandstone arches of Escalante, to the corner of tomorrow, through Tuesdays, up to the edge of calamity and amnesia. I abscond with others' memories. Mine are too hard, too heavy. I must put them down, have to. I wrap my heart away in an orange shawl embroidered with the names of the ones I must forget. Silk, hand woven by Tuareg women whose men ride camels through the sands of Moroccan deserts in shrouds of moonlight. I know these men, their eyes above shuttered faces, their story told by the next generation. A story of vanish and water's edge, of fabric and mystery. Some fragrance takes over when words fall away. I follow that, and the alembic of silence fires me into compassion, marries me to golden osmanthus flower found only here on a Tennessee riverbank in a humidity so costly I can't afford its moist embrace. In the treble notes of lemon myrtle, I infuse disappearance with rooibos and African honeybush. Sip the forgotten ambush of flavor, of caravan and feast. Become gypsy again. Read my own palm. It says, practice. It's funny, Zoom poetry where I don't get to see all your faces, but I can imagine all the love that's shining at me, and I hope you can feel the love shining at you. So I have been all my life a huge and enormous fan of one of our most famous Mexican people, which is of course Frida Kahlo. And if you don't know her, look in your closet. I'm sure she's on some t-shirt that you actually have. I'm going to talk later in my talk a little bit about ignition. So I want to talk a little bit about the ignition of this. I love to hand out postcards of paintings and just say, go, follow the story. So this is actually a postcard from an image of one of Frida Kahlo's paintings, the one in the double bed where she's in the bottom and the skeleton is on top and it's covered in vines, but maybe you'll look it up. This poem was written in my beloved Allende, New Mexico, where I had the privilege of living for one amazing year. And this poem is called A Dream of Frida. Vines grow up around the coverlet where the artist sleeps. A ghost of hyacinths floats above her, wired to explode into a destiny of calamity. She dreams herself into her future, where vines grow around a wisteria trellis, and she's walking the hacienda's veranda, and vines entwine, flower to needle, leaf to bud to bloom, seed and leaves again, then dry, they fall and blow. Easterly wind, October's heat takes the bosque down into golden. Vines grow up around a skeleton month where no mother calls the name of her daughter. No one strokes her head, calls her mi caratida, mi corazón. She's alone by the Rio, a glint of light. Shiny coins of water music clinking, moving swift over rocks where vines grow up in the sleep of aspens. They quiet, calm them as horses do by breath. A tree breathes into autumn. A woman sleeps under a yellow quilt of leaves. Grasses lay down. Apples are sudden in an orchard of over. November calls her by name. Something she can't see strokes her again. Her mother becomes visible on the stairs of the hacienda. Her mother is singing on the veranda, a girlhood song in perfect Castilian. No tiene miedo, she sings. She sings of shadow and light, sombre y luz. She strokes the banister as she descends. She walks the long road to the river. The cottonwoods arch overhead. Moonlight peers through bare branches and clouds. She sees color. The night is a new dress. She carries a bouquet of bones to the edge of the water. Vines grow up around the fallen poplars. She never catches her breath. She runs from the voice calling her name. The road is stuttering in tree. The trees sing in Spanish of falling. The yellow quilt is spread under a wisteria vine in full, fragrant bloom. Her hair is tied back with a lilac ribbon. Her mother wears a dress of shadow. She is drowning in a bed of white bones. She hasn't worn lace in years. Her day is set to go off on a hairpin trigger. Anything can make her go down that road. She saw it once, quickly, around a corner in the museum. She's walking up the stairs, dressed in fallen leaves. It was a landscape painted in 1806. It was the French countryside, but exactly the same. That gold, the bones, the leaves in drift. She never knew the painter's name. She called it once in a dream. He came to her dressed in velvet. He lay in the dark bed, whispering Sombre, sombre, te amo, she whispered back. There was no map to this place. The museum was in Milan. The dream was tangled in her hair. The vines grew up the trellis to the second floor. She slept on as if nothing had happened. I love that poem. You know how sometimes you write something that you're like insanely in love with and you stay in love with it for years? I'm madly in love with my freedom home. So I've been working. You know, us poets, we're the first responders. We have to be. We're EMTs on the scene, do no harm. And so, of course, I wrote about COVID. And I don't know, maybe it's something, it's something about the breath and the fact that we're like alone for huge long hours, but it seems like everything I write wants to be 1,000 pages long, and then I have to sort of fight to reel it back in. But that has something to do with ignition and also with hanging in. And this poem is called COVID Kintsugi, and starts with this little epigraph. Kintsugi, golden joinery, is a Japanese technique that repairs broken pottery using gold lacquer. And it reflects a philosophy that breakage and repair are part of an object, not something to disguise. Chant 108 sacred names for beloveds gone. Scatter rose petals, call everyone you love, because this road leads straight to the hearth. What do we pack to stay home? Build an altar to the old ordinary, packed movie theaters, cappuccino in cafes, dance class. All past loves forgiven, because really, why not? Collect all we miss. Reaching for the hand of a stranger in greeting, inviting a friend over for tea, leaning in for a kiss. Every door closed means you get to see the room you are already in. What if here is enough? And now, how everything fell a crazy Icarus into the sea, disappearing. Work, restaurants, parades, dropping in for a visit. So fragile are expectations, hopes, needs. There goes habit, jobs, routines, origami into afternoons, watching bread rise, turning pages, checking email again and again. Oh, rinse of repeat, hours and hours of news. Black is the new black. So much solitude, looking like a kitchen and lots of time. Say prayers for the many. Light candles, bless wine, break bread, because what could open our hearts? What can we give without touch? Love. What can we send without postage? Prayers. What is ever present? Beauty. Breath by breath, we do these slow days. These days do us, set on rerun, coffee news, stack wood, tea, punctuated by snacks, snacks, snacks. Who makes pancakes for one? Gluten-free, no less. Rise to the occasion and shore up your courage. Offer hope, hilarity, chutzpah. Stockpile patience. As plans fall away, the moon answers. The open palm of the divine is offered as lists are unmade. What if and when? And the answer is, as you know, who knows? This might be the slowdown that saves, the open door to dream. Take the B-town, baby, crosstown, where your quiet lives. We invent a new intimacy, born of eyes shining kindness above fancy, plain, simple, elaborate masks. My mask, a gift to you, yours, a gift to me, collateral care. The heart has signposts tracing the way. Virtual is the new love language. Masked, we'll cross safely to new. Kint Sugi. We'll turn broken into mend, the gold of hold, the heel of seal, the parts our lives broke into, reset. We'll let the rejoined edges shine, apply the resilient skin of solve, patch of peace, move forward into what we do not and cannot know, but home is where this story starts. The view of startling hillside in October snow, insects flitting in late lit air. Here's no alone, just a day lived breath by breath. Light through pine forest, deer at dusk, Mama Fox and her kits bounding loop-de-loop in the meadow, contagious joy, because this tells our rhizomic truth. Spread the word. We were always going viral. So, excuse me, so many ways that apart we gather. Apart, we are whole. Woo! That's a big poem, huh? I want to read another poem that sort of feels, oh, thank you, Elena. I want to read another poem from this season. One thing that I love very much when I read is to think about our when. And we have a lot of whens going on. And also we live in some very, very different climates. But this is a when from New Mexico, and kind of a writing when. The title of this poem is called Little Vision of the Great Intangible. Some vowels disappear. Some arc across lines of poetry, black etched ravens that have lately been cawing. Their wings are consonants, or would be. In the hardness scale, there is no measure for my heart, neither talc nor ruby. Streak across me as lightning in the canyon sky leaves marks. Tattoo divine on my skin, ink me into rain. Say my name, and I'll call you into flame, my secret treasure, my astral tango. I go to petals, fragrant, the finality of garden in October, burnt umber, sienna, wild thistle, and mourning dove. It's the puzzle we solve by putting the box away. I am porous. You are crazy weather, fallen apples, the choke cherries gotten entirely by jays, mullen stalk gone to pillar and seed. The fallen parts of wisteria I sweep at my doorway each morning. What wakes me to startle redwing and cirrus? You arrive in my afternoon, a pot of tea already brewing, hot on the hot stovetop, coals in the grate, bread in the oven, past ferment into seas and risen. Golden sesame, open that lid. You have the words, the scent of welcome is over us, a Giotto nimbus, the smoke after the train left Finlandia station, a revolution in the air. None will be left behind this time. Gather us all into peace. For once, you can. Whatever happens to us is in the capable hands of the maple's scarlet leaves. Whatever we do next is how the peach tree will remember us. It's big, these times that we're called and asked to show up for right now. They're big, they're big, they're big, they're hard, they're full of grief. And so we need each other. We need each other more than we ever have. But we have to speak the words because that's the job. This poem is called No More Tears for America. Our hearts cry for justice from every corner of the world. And in my corner, the alerts on my phone, I see them and know, as if this was just another hard day in El Norte, we are grieving. As if this was simple, another innocent murdered. In Nicaragua, journalists die of COVID. The disease Ortega insists is not there. In my New York, a policeman drives through barricades into bodies. Our president golfs and calls the army. We lie in the park in downtown Denver for 9 minutes, first silent, then chanting, I can't breathe, because George Floyd couldn't. I wanted to write about choosing to act and call it No More Tears for America. I wanted to write a poem about response, to tell you that responding is a prayer, marching is a prayer to turn America to the good, to turn police into peacekeepers, the government into a guardian of the people. America, when will you take your knee off the neck of your people? When will you take a knee for Emmett Till, for the Navajo Nation, for the Japanese internment camps, for children caged at the border, the dreamers? Will you stay on your knees for your history? My phone sounds alarm after alarm in my hands. I look up as if grief was a place I only read about. I didn't want to live here. I wanted to shout, no more tears for America, as if it was a fact, a response, a truth. But the murdering knee on George Floyd's neck taught me these words. We must cry more tears for America, and tears for the fallen people of color, our innocent dead. We must march, write, pray for beloveds gone, whose pictures hang in living rooms where their voices no longer ring. We will cry more tears for America and tears for her offices of rotten power, her officers' heart hardened like the Pharaoh against us. Let us see there is no enemy now. It is all promised land. If the Red Sea closes, it closes over us all. Let us cry more tears for the children, for the hungry, for the sorrowing. Help us to know that we are the stewards of immigration rights and voting booths. We ask healing for the families of George Floyd, Rashard Brooks, Freddie Carlos Gray, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, so many more, the Charleston 9, the Central Park 5, the 16th Street Baptist Church. Children, don't stop. Don't stop. Say their names and remember Mary Turner, Hayes Turner, Medgar Evans, Dr. King. May we never say their names, that we do not weep, that we do not march, that we do not shout for justice in America. We choose over and over to feel grief instead of numb for brothers and sisters tear gassed in Seattle, Minneapolis, Atlanta. Over and over, we choose horror instead of denial for rubber bullets fired at bodies in the burning streets of our broken America. We choose every day. We awake and we choose speech over silence for the racist blight of this ruined nation. No more tears for America. I wanted to tell you, but there are tears. It's very simple. Like the streets we keep choosing to fill, like the poems we keep choosing to write, will sound an alarm, and it will ring for justice, for equality, for peace from all corners, that one day we may awake and say, no more tears for America. Big. It's hard, right? It's hard, but it's the work. It's the work. It's the grief and the praise. And then it's kind of the staying in and the willing to stay in. So I just have a couple more poems left, but this is kind of another big one. And I'm going to talk about this in the next section where we get to talk after we talk a little bit about ignition, climbing in, and then we'll talk a little bit about climbing out. And this is like my love home for my San Miguel. Homies of my San Miguel, my place, my beautiful place that I adore. I went into the iglesia of San Antonio and became quiet in the way of seeking, buscando, and the way of losing, perdiendo, in the way of men that cannot touch and the women that want them to. Became quiet in the way of cobblestone and a pantheon of saints and angels and repeals from Oaxaca and the beaded deer antlers of the Huichol people. Street sounds and jake breaks, tobacco fumes and wrought iron balustrades. I wanted the table linens, their silken bouquets embroidered in sunny day colors and the cutaway absence defining the pattern. I wanted Talavera tiled bed tables, something with a drawer and an iron pull, and I wanted elaborate door knockers, an ear of corn or a lion. And I also wanted nothing. I wanted not to want, not to spend or acquire or speak. I desired nothing dyed another color or stitched or carved or at all ornate, but in a wanting kind of way. I wanted something vagabond, something fossil, something that would offer a child a candle to burn at the feet of Claire, roses for the Holy Mother. Tell me your story, I think. I almost say, though I speak to no one. Suddenly, after so many months and years, I want to weep at the magnificent disaster of it all. Then I want ice plants blooming rampant, the pressa full, the trumpet vines in shattering vivid. The way my skin was so hot and so cold, both at once. I sat and looked a long time and soaked my skirt in rain-pooled stone in the ancient and the ache of it. I remember that I loved the way your house smelled and felt alive in ways of beauty and now. I ask, what will speak later? And I didn't know. Platanos in a paper sack, a dessert, a tongue of desire, laurel trees pressed edge to edge, making their wall of green in the Jardin. And I want to be quiet in the way of leaving and arriving, which I always am. The chatter of stay is what departs first. And then the love we did not and will not make, and the future we will not have. Though I bought and built a farm of chocolate and gladiolas to learn this. But I still have the music of Hill and Cartes, and picadillo tortas at the Sunday tiangues, and the charco at sundown, a murmuration of cowbirds, and the Soriana checkout lady who loved me, her smile all braces and glamour, and the secret peach tree in the parking lot, and the Gloria etiquette I never mastered, and Café de Ollo and Atole from the Tamale family, early morning on the Salida de Querétaro, and tuberoses and freesias at the tucked away stand on the Ancha, and car parts. So many car parts. You can't rush gratitude, it turns out, but it comes or you get there. It's the secret destination of all travel, of all the beloveds you leave. All right, so this is the last poem. So we're coming up on our full moon of November, and everyone who knows me knows that I'm absolutely madly in love with the moon. This poem is called Moon in This Season. Saw the beaver moon, but it wasn't madness, just that, full November, soft snow. Every buck loves his antlers, then loses them moon. Striped gopher looks back moon, the Assiniboine people say, and they ought to know. Last night in dream, Robert Bly kissed me, or maybe just inhaled my perfume ecstatically, and I'm exaggerating, pretending to know famous poets in my dreams. He gave my sister and I a robot of spalted maple, showing even good wood has a home in my nights. It was 12H, as ever, El Dorado Towers. And yes, Mom appeared in this dream, wearing a gorgeous ring on the bejeweled hand of the beautiful dark one, whom the robot awoke into when we found her key and turned it. She came with piles and stacks of printouts, Gnostic wisdom, Kabbalah, theorems, equations. She told me something so interesting. What was it? I can't predict what this may have to do with eternity or rebirth. I do know this about the nativity, though. Everyone was there that needed to be there. Goslings, camels, grain and gold, the stable, fragrant herbs, warm oils, a burrow or two, starlight slipping through ceiling joists, bees, I am hoping, and their startling honey, and the erotic questions poised by buzz and hum. And me, I think, and you, and the words we will need to say this come morning. Thank you. Okay, woo! Woo, 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 woo! You know, if I was there, I'd be yelling. I'd be dancing, I'd be yelling. Oh my gosh, I see people putting beautiful lines they loved in the chat. That is like the total best thing. All right, so now we get to have a little bit of craft conversation. And one of the things I really wanted to talk about is, as I said, ignition. What starts us? What launches us into poem? And I guess the thing that as a lifer that I know that is the most important thing is make that ignition smaller and smaller and more ordinary. To me, it feels like poetry is the self firing with the world, with lots of oxygen and a good mix, and then we get the fire of poetry. So one thing we learn to sort of mediate and move between is self and the world. And we all know this from our bodies work. It's like, all poets, like all painters who paint themselves. What was it? Frida Kahlo said, I love to paint women, and the woman I love to paint the most is myself. Well, we poets sort of have something very similar. We kind of go into the inner world for a lot of what we know. So we want to always hold that balance between the inner world and the outer world. And in my writing practice, I love to kind of always have a mix of being down and in, and then looking up and letting something that I'm seeing inform where I'm going to go next. That also allows for the other great thing that we love to have in our poetry, which is the gift of surprise and random. You know, Frost said, no tears for the writer, no tears for the reader, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. So it's the same, you know, that moving between those two is what allows so much to come in and allows a thought that we weren't quite having, but maybe two thoughts away to come. I like to have lots of little simple ignitions, not really prompts exactly, but looking around the room, looking outside, seeing how I am, what I dreamt, really trying to practice walking in the kitchen and writing down the names of 3 spices and a line from a cookbook. Really trying to give my, feed myself some wild stuff that I know will emerge into something else entirely, because really that's the goal. I call it the holiness of not knowing. And that's one of our great tools in the poetry toolbox. Keats called it negative capability, which sounds really whatever, but it's actually a very simple and real thing that all writers know. Negative capability means the ability to stay present with what you don't know, when you don't know what's coming next. And we all know that in our writing, when something comes that we didn't know and we write that, that's when the poem turns into discovery and starts taking us somewhere we didn't know. And that's the hottest thing that there is in our writing life. Then we get to the moment of, well, I've gotten into this thing. How do I get back out of this thing? And it's really interesting because, I've been writing since I was 8, of course, starting as, in 3rd grade, writing a poem, as all children did in the 50s. I mean, this was just, it wasn't special. It wasn't special to paint or play that weird black instrument, the tonette. I mean, everybody put on their father's shirts, your arms through the sleeves, and painted, and everybody wrote poetry. They wrote a Thanksgiving poem, a Christmas poem, a poem to their mother. Everyone did this. It's just what you did. And I'm just someone who didn't stop doing that. But you can imagine at this point, I've kind of written a lot of different poems, but one of the great skills that you weirdly acquire is a balance between those poems like you could hear in Frida. I hope you heard in Frida. The Frida poem, I sat there, I looked at a postcard, and boom, I let the poem happen to me. But the poem Iglesia of San Antonio, that poem I started my first day that I was ever in San Miguel. And I sat downtown and I looked and I looked and I fell in love. I fell madly in love with many things, as all of you who know me know, is my thing. And then whatever was going to happen to me happened. I carried around the handwritten beginning of that poem for 10 years. I never typed it. And every now and then I would take it out because that's sort of a lifer thing to do. And I would look at it and I would go, oh, I still don't know. And I would put it away. But 2 years ago, when I came to San Miguel to teach at the Writers' Conference, I, of course, bring it every year. And I got it out and I looked at it and I think I know the end. So I wrote the end. I thought, that's great. I know the end. And then 2 weeks ago, I took it back out and I said, that wasn't really quite the end. I hadn't really gotten to gratitude yet. And then I saw what the end was. And then I wrote it. But that capability of both, having the muse sing through you and the blurt and the rush onto the paper. And then I call this kind of the mule and the muse, then doing kind of the mule work with a different poem, just carrying it around, wondering about it, thinking about it, not pushing it, waiting. And that's where kind of the grace of doing the work comes in. the knowing to push, the knowing to wait, so many delicious elements that our writing teaches us. And to me, that's the great thing that rewards all the passion, all the study, all the diligence, all the poets that we love, all the poems that we read, all our friends, poets that we listen to, is this beautiful, beautiful possibility of somehow getting in a way we didn't know we could, and then getting out a way we didn't know we could. I remember when I was thinking at one point about how editing and revising a poem is very much like rock climbing, which I learned a great deal about from listening to my son talk about it. And I thought about how when you get into a stuck place on a rock, or you get into a stuck place in a poem, what's the thing you have to do? The thing you have to do is shift your weight. I mean, there's a few things you have to do, but the main thing you have to do is shift. Wherever you were going, the poem isn't going that way. So you shift. And then the next thing you do is you reach. You reach. And then you get that little finger hold. Something there, something there. And then you commit. You commit, and the next thing is trust. Boom and go. Boom and go. Shift, reach, commit, trust. Because we are very blessed with a very plastic medium. We can always go, whoops, no, that wasn't it. And so in that situation, we are very blessed to be the people with pens on the ground. Thank you. I would love to have some questions, Miss Catherine.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, beautifully.
Oh, it is such a joy to hear from you, Judyth, because you spend so much of your time giving voice to other poets. You teach others, you nurture others, you give open mics, you create platforms for others, you give workshops. I've attended your workshops, but we don't get to hear from you nearly enough. So it's such a pleasure to hear from you tonight and to get to hear your voice. It's very, very special. I mean, it's so interesting that, you talked about the editing process. I think people who know you and how effusive and spontaneous you are probably think the poems just fly from your fingertips and land on the paper, and you never do any editing. But you do edit, as you've just shared with us. You've shared a little bit of your process. You edit for other people as well. That's one of the services you have. It's very hard to find a good poetry editor. So my question to you is, who edits the editor? I mean, everybody seems to have a trusted reader, a trusted editor who, when you're stuck, you can show the poem to them and they can give you some constructive, honest feedback. Do you have such a trusted reader?
I was extremely blessed for many, many years to have the poet Jack Mueller as my mentor. And he was one of the beat poets. He knew everybody and everybody knew him. And he was tough. Oh my gosh, he would say, you've got adjectival pileup going on there, Hill. That was one of his great expressions. And the other one that was so fantastic was, give nouns SWAT, adjectives not. And so he kind of weaned, I mean, you could tell that I guess I've got a little slippage since I don't have Jack anymore, but I really found a new voice and got much tougher on myself inside my work. And the truth of me is, I'm an insane worker bee. Everyone who knows me, who's ever been to my house, knows I have poems pasted up, all, stuff written on them. I work and work and work. Jack died a few years ago. I have him inside my head though, for sure. I mean, he's absolutely with me. One of his other great teachings was, and this is a very interesting one, very subtle, obey emergent form, which means if you've got a first draft going and you've got some 3-line stanzas, some 5, some 4, But you see that there's more tercets, 3-line stanzas than anything. Go for it. Put the poem there and see if that's what it wants. Obey emergent form. So that's a very strong editing thing for me. And I have my beloved, beloved friend, Art Goodtimes, who has been my friend, my co-teacher, my teacher, my mentor, and my beloved for more than 30 years. 30, let's see, yeah, almost 40 years, about 38 years I've known Art. And he's a brilliant, brilliant poem. He lives up on the western slope in Colorado. Everyone in Colorado knows Art. Everyone in the mushroom world knows Art. So I have Art and I have Jack. But you're right, Catherine, that's a very good point, because I have to be careful. And this is an important thing. I am an editor. When I edit someone's work, I make a vow. My voice goes away. I step into the writer's voice, their sensibility, their heart, and I just follow that and fine tune to where they're going in their work, which I think is really the most important thing there is in editing. But I'm careful for myself right now in my life about what I'm doing in my work, who I show it to. And that's because I don't really know where I'm going in my writing, but I'm hoping that in a way, it'll be something that I and sort of no one has exactly seen before. And so I want that huge, spacious capability of making all the mistakes I need and writing in a way where people go, whoa, what is that? What are you doing there? And for me, I also don't want to write the quintessential Judyth poem. I mean, I have a way that I write, but I'm always trying to push myself around the corner from that. See what the next place to stand in poetry, the next voice. What's my view now? I feel that's how we grow. Yeah.
Well, I have to ask too, I mean, you've written about several places that you've shared with us tonight, from Tennessee to the whole of America, but most especially San Miguel. I mean, San Miguel seems to be a place that has really gotten under your skin, and it's the poetry of place. I mean, I don't know anybody who has evoked San Miguel better. I wrote down, I built a farm of chocolate and gladiolas. That was one of my favorite lines. And they're so rich with images, but without sounding like a tourist guide. I mean, I think that's the danger of writing about San Miguel. It sometimes sounds like an advertisement for a travel and leisure magazine. But you've captured it in images. I mean, tell me about the sense of place and how important place is to you.
My second most important, I've had many, many great teachers. I'm very, very blessed. Besides the opportunity to study with the most generous poet in the world, Robert Bly. I mean, he was a voice, he brought us, I mean, the reason everyone reads Rumi and Mirabai and everybody is Robert. Then I studied with the storyteller, Gioia Timpanelli. And then for most of my life, I studied with Dolores LaChapelle, the deep ecologist. And Dolores invited Art Goodtimes, again, there he is, invited us, and this was back in 1988, invited what he called the Wild Women of Santa Fe up to Telluride. And it was Natalie Goldberg, Joan Logie, me, Miriam. I mean, it was really like all the heavy hitters of Santa Fe poetry. But his reason for doing this was he was creating Talking Gourd. And the Talking Gourd was an opportunity to study with deep ecologist Dolores LaChapelle. And Dolores said to us, she charged us and said, become the bard of your place. Learn what grasses grow. Learn what comes up when, so when it doesn't, you know. Sing your place. Sing your place. And that started for me on my beautiful, beautiful ranch, Rockmouth in Sapeo, and then my farm, Simple Choice Farm in San Miguel. And of course, all my incredible excursions with my women in Tennessee, and now here in Colorado. Learn the land, sing the place. Know when the carp go under the frozen pond. Know when the owl comes and sings in the morning. I mean, this is our job. Wendell Berry says, protect what you can see from your front porch. And so I feel that this passionate love that I have for our places is, a way that I can sing them into our holding them dear.
Well, I have a question that may have been inspired by your Tears for America poem from Lucina Kathman, someone you know through your work with.
She's my mentor. Lucina is my mentor in
Yes.
The activism that I'm doing right now in my life as president of Penn San Miguel.
And her question is there a difference between the responsibility of the poet versus the prose writer's responsibility? Do you see a difference between those two roles?
I think I do. I think our prose writers are really charged with helping us understand in a way that's a little deeper and sort of grittier. And I feel that our poets are here to raise our spirits, raise our hearts, sing it out, and impassion us, call us to action. And I know that prose can do this too, but it feels like poetry is like a force field that just sings through. And because, it always seems like if you have too much factoid in a poem, the poem sinks of its own weight. And I also love, the idea that we try to, as an arts activist, which is a lot what our work is in Penn International, and certainly in our incredible Penn San Miguel, our work is to make beauty so that we feel at all times both the grief and the praise and the voices of our community raised to address what is important to us, what we value so we can keep it, what we want to go away so we can help do something about that. So I feel that, poetry, because poetry has rhythm, sometimes rhyme, it sings itself into the body, into a different way. One thing that Robert always talked about is what happens in poem is when you hear a poem that's got rhythm and music, assonance, dissonance, the psyche listens in a different way than it listens to prose. And there's also the startle, right? The break. Okay, we're singing, we've got the, and then boom, silence. Silence is the third most important element in all poetry. And the use of making quiet is what allows something to really sink down into the heart. So we say, oh, what can I do? What can I do? What can I say? How do I show up for this? And that's kind of one of the things I feel is really important in activist poetry. That and singing the world to the good. Speak for what we love. Be a voice for what you love, and being a voice, being what Francis Ponge called an ambassador for the silent ones. For those who have no voices, be the voice.
It's another reflection of what you were calling negative capability, or what John Keats called negative capability. It's that the silence and the spaces and the things that are not about fact or logic, but the part that you access through poetry, that's the kind of singing that you're talking about. I have a question from the audience on what has changed the most for you over the years.
I don't do bad men anymore. No, wait, about poetry? What has changed the most? Okay, well, what's changed the most is, I think when I was young, firstly, when I was very, very young, of course, writing in the 60s, we all wrote those tiny, skinny, sort of Denise Levertov could do it. Let's just say that. But, we wrote these like skinny poems, right? 3 words in a line. Catherine's nodding because she remembers this moment. When I became a runner, when I had my daughter, I was running. And as I began to run, I began to have a lot of air. And, the poet Charles Olson wrote really fantastically about this, about the breath in the body, of writing to your breath line. And so writing to my breath line, writing these really long line poems that take a lot of air to say, was something that I moved into, and that gave me this sort of, also this scope to get, I don't want to say exactly surreal, but to have a lot jammed in the poem, because that's what I love. Same way I make cookies, to be honest. Like, how many yummy things can I put in there? So I think for me, you know, it was like the change in really paying attention to my body and the breath line, and then getting absolutely, absolutely solid in my writing practice about not crossing out. And really having finally a very good technique, a great technique, which I will say, of how we really stay with what's coming, instead of having that editor comment like, I mean, we need our editing brain. We all know this, but we need it later, not when the poem is coming. So I have this technique now where I'm writing, if I hear myself going, and I have that, you know, the edgy resistance, I lift my pen, I move it a scooch, as Tina would say, over, and I put it back down, and then I keep going. So I've soothed my desire to admit that I'm making a mistake, but I don't cross anything out. I don't tell myself, oh, shut up, oh, that's bad. I now honestly have, because, you know, a lot of us, we all, back in the day, Natalie Goldberg in Santa Fe, I mean, that was the thing, was time writing, was, you know, writing down the bones. And Natalie hired Miriam, Joni, and me, and we were all teaching the bones method. But it was really hard, that don't cross out thing. And it's kind of taken me many years to get to it. But that is one of the tricks of negative capability, is the ability to just say it. That way you can say the unspeakable, the unsayable, the stuff you didn't know you needed to say.
I have one more question from the audience that I suspect is from a poet who wants to know how you find the connective thread in a collection of poems. How do you tie that together?
Yes, you know what? That brings me to a very amazing little announcement that I want to make. How do I? The truth is, I've made many, many manuscripts for myself and for others. And kind of what I do is take everything, and then I either do it on a clothesline, if it's summer and I can be outside, or I do it on the floor, all down the hall, my whole house. Okay? I identify the first poem of the manuscript. I identify the middle poem of the manuscript, and then I identify where it ends. I can be wrong about this, but it's my starting point. And then I begin to put poems in, and I see, how do I get from the beginning to the middle? How do I get from the middle back to the beginning? One of my strongest things I rely on is not necessarily content, but music. Every now and then there'll be a content thing that you're following, especially, you know, if you've got a big body of work. But sometimes it's really just the music of it. Like the music of this moves into the music of that, and I'll look for that. So I will go and I'll move back and forth from the end to the middle, from the middle to the end, back and forth. And then I gather it all up, put it in a folder with a clip. I love those things. They're like incredibly wonderful. A manuscript with a little folder with a clip. And then I get in bed with my pencil and I read it. And I read the whole thing. And pretty soon I'll see, oh no, this doesn't work there. Maybe I'll just take it out for then. Or maybe I'll see right away. And I'll just keep doing it. I'll keep futzing around. And pretty soon I'll see it. I'll see, oh, okay. Because I like there to be kind of a narrative arc, to start here and get there. I kind of like there to be short poems, first poem and last poem. So that like when you go and you open a book in a store, you know, to read it, a lot of times you'll turn to the last poem. I like it sort of to be one thing on one page. Same with the first. Not always, but it's kind of a good thing. And then I just play with it and I stay inside it. And then I'll know that's it. And I'll read it over and over and over until I know, yes, that's right, that follows. Not that many people read a book from cover to cover, but every now and then, oh my gosh, you'll pick up a poetry book and you will start it and you'll keep going. So I want to repay that reader. I want my books to, and your books, whoever's book I'm doing. So one of the things that I'm thinking of doing, no, I'm actually going to do this. I'm working on a manuscript now, and it's a really big one. It's a big one. And what I'm going to start in 2 weeks is a manuscript class where we are all going to be doing our own manuscripts. We're going to be sharing, I'll be sharing my process. People will be sharing their own processes. I will teach every part of it. It will come with a half-hour personal mentoring from me. And we're going to hold all of each other. We're going to be a clan of about to be published poets. And we'll hold each other accountable for producing a manuscript. So email me, get on the list, because we're going to start this and we're all going to publish both. And then I will also be talking about query letters, submission, the whole shebang.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you. We're coming to a close, and I would like to invite our host, Maya Williams, back onto the stage for a few closing remarks. Maya, where are you?
This was such a love fest. I hope you guys feel how much I absolutely am madly in love.
Oh, I hope you can read your chat line at the end. It's full of loving remarks.
And I hope you can see my jazz hands. Whoa, whoa. Fantastic. Oh, Catherine, what a wonderful conversation that was. You're the perfect person to handle that today, obviously. And Judyth, I just miss you so much. I'm just so glad you were with us today. Thank you.
I'm so homesick. I'm so homesick, darling.
And thank you for kicking off this incredible new structure for Poetry Alive. I think it's going to be a winner. So I want just a few closing remarks. I want to also thank the San Miguel Poetry Café advisory board members who are off screen tonight. Libby Denard, Sally Kravitz, and Lee Harris. And of course, our production team, Patty Garcia and Tina Beakey. And
can I just say
yes.
say that? I've got to say this. My mentors, my beloveds, Patty Garcia, Tina Beakey, I could not be doing my life right now without you. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, my darling, beloved Catherine. I'm so grateful you're in my life. And Maya, girl, I knew you when, and I'm glad I still do.
Me too. Me too. And you brought up the Frida poem, and I thought, well, here we have Frida right here in my living room, painted by a young, fabulous Mexican painter, Roberto Fentavilla, who has a tienda and studio in San Miguel. So a shout out to Roberto. But Judyth, you and your wild writing pen, my God, have my deepest gratitude, really. You open our hearts and minds to the power of poetry, and you always encourage us to use our powers for good. And isn't that what life is all about, right? So thank you. To our audience, whether you joined us from across the continent or across the street, we really appreciate your presence. And thank you for making comments in the chat and sending in your questions, because it makes a much more vibrant program for everyone. And I want to encourage everyone to save the date. The next Poetry Alive will be on a Monday, November 30th. And it'll be a reading, a teaching, and a conversation with Richard Blanco, one of only 5 poets in United States history to be commissioned by a president-elect to write and present a poem at a presidential inauguration. So it is quite a treat for us to have Richard next as well. I wanted to mention too, the very first inaugural poet was Robert Frost in the 60s. So, the company we keep, right? So Richard is one of San Miguel's favorite adopted literary sons, and you're welcome to participate in the online book discussion that's coming up this Tuesday. It'll be about his new collection, How to Love a Country. And that will be in advance of his keynote address on December 6th. You can pre-register online for all 3 Blanco events. You'll receive a follow-up email with all the critical, pertinent email address links to Judyth's work and upcoming workshops, and also all the information about the Blanco events. So thank you all for being here, and namaste, buenas noches, and good night.